We begin in God's name. Greetings. Welcome to a new episode of Ghamdi's Desk. We continue our series on the 23 questions series. And today, we begin the 141st episode titled, What is Hadith? This is the 7th session on this subject. Thank you, Ghamdi Sahab, for sharing your time. Hadith represents the historical account of the Prophet's life, biography, teachings, and deeds. How did the Prophet himself view this record? Through 3 essential questions, we traced the relations and saw the complete period of the Rashidun Caliphs, examining each one distinctly, starting with Abu Bakr and Umar, then other companions. After the companions' era, Ghamdi Sahab, you mentioned that a tradition formed among the followers of the companions, with knowledge transmitted through historical records by the companions, reaching Hazrat Umar bin Abdul Aziz by the end of the 1st century, who then issued a directive. Ghamdi Sahab, what happens after this?
My aim in concluding my previous talk on Caliph Umar bin Abdul Aziz's directive, which I had referred to, was to correct a common misconception which is prevalent among those unfamiliar with this field. It is believed that in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, Hegira, that certain books were written. People then discover works like Imam Bukhari's collection or Abu Dawood's collection. And then sometimes people find 3, 4, 5, or perhaps even 8 or 9 narrators in works such as that of Al-Bayhaqi. They assume that the transmission involved numerous individuals. I have said that this is not the case.
Okay.
It is at the end of the 1st century, Hegira, when not just scholars, but even at the state level, in that vast empire, and under a leader like Caliph Umar bin Abdul Aziz, a directive was given that such a system should be established. Scholars were expected to specialize in this field of knowledge. They were to develop expertise in this discipline, and regarding the life and biography of the Prophet, peace be upon him, his teachings, and the deeds and practices, if any narration existed, that could be authenticated. It was to be not only scrutinized, but also organized and compiled in an appropriate manner. I mentioned that in the last year of the 1st century, Hegira, that Caliph Umar bin Abdul Aziz took the reins of the caliphate.
Right.
At the time when he issued this directive, and which in turn led to many scholars in many different regions beginning to turn their focus on it. What was the situation at the time? I'll sketch a picture of that time before you. There too, it is generally believed that people might have taken years to even start working on this problem. I had previously discussed the research of Dr. Azmi Sahab with you, and many contemporary researchers have also contributed. In fact, they have discovered manuscripts. And these documents clarify that the knowledge, which was in the possession of the companions, was already starting to be organized, and at least 50 such compilations came into being.
Right.
Following this came the era of the followers of the companions. We know that they came forth to learn this knowledge from the companions. According to Dr. Mustafa Azmi's research, the number of documents compiling this material comes to about 250 or so. That is, by the time Umar bin Abdul Aziz was issuing his directive and charging scholars with this task, such substantial written material was already in existence.
Okay.
We cannot find those early compilations by the companions today, or we might only discover a few of the collections from the followers of the companions. But this material was available to people of that era. The written corpus had already been established. Despite the conservative approach of the Rashidun Caliphs toward it, despite all the strictness exercised by Hazrat Umar, even regarding the oral transmission of these traditions, we have shared those facts with you. People transcribed the Hadith material, and thus the written materials had already existed in the background. After this, now let us consider the other aspect of it. I had only hinted at it before, but before moving forward, we need to understand it in some detail. The Hadith wariwa'at, that is, when people continue to narrate these accounts, when we read these narrations, 2, 3, or 4 of them, the general impression is that these are from ordinary people who have attended a gathering of the companions. They have met and sat together with them, or the companions have gathered somewhere. and someone heard it, so it was like X heard from Y, and so forth. I told you that in the last phase of the Companions' era, that is, this wasn't the case in the second half of the 1st century. Instead, those people had emerged by this time, who had made this field of knowledge their specialty and adopted it as their profession. This wasn't just a minor change. On the contrary, this meant that the subject is no longer merely about reporting only hearsay. Now, such individuals had emerged, who systematically participated in scholarly circles and aiming to pursue this knowledge as their life's work, began studying this field.
It's now in the hands of scholars.
The matter is now in the hands of scholars, and now the scholars were also compiling the narrations. And the power of memorizing among these people was quite extraordinary at that time, and the extent of that ability is beyond our current understanding.
Really?
As people were writing, and I told you that about 250 compilations were formed during the times of the followers of the Companions. We are now familiar with much of their details. And along with it, those who were orally reporting were not merely listening and passing on certain information. Instead, they were collecting these teachings. Cognizant that this is knowledge, they were pursuing it as knowledge, preserving it as knowledge, memorizing it, and conveying it further to their students as knowledge.
Okay.
This phenomena, too, at the end of the 1st century Hegira, had become fully evident. This is the reason that I told you that such renowned scholars had begun to focus on this field of knowledge. Similarly, some people believe that hundreds of thousands of narrations were scattered around and were in the possession of the people. Probably it was Imam Bukhari who conducted the first research. This research, the topics of our discussions, and under which we had been reviewing this history, what were they? What was the policy of transcribing them? And what was the state of oral narrations? What was the state of research at the time? One approach to research was that which the Companions had done, or what the Rashidun caliphs had done. In their times, when someone reported a narration, they would call and ask for a witness for it. If there was even a slight doubt about it, or if they felt some sort of dissatisfaction about it. The third thing, inquiry or research, which we had been reviewing, that too started to be seen as a bona fide science in this era. It wasn't that the world had to wait until the end of the 2nd century Hegira, or until the 3rd century Hegira, that the scholars of the science of men would emerge. The first personality we come across in this regard is Imam Shabi. He was born in the era of Hazrat Umar. May God be pleased with him. He was a renowned follower of the Companions, and not just him, along with him were figures such as Muhammad bin Sirin, Ahsan, al-Basri, Sa'id bin Jubair, and Ibrahim Naqi. These are the scholars of the science of men who were born and who flourished in the second half of the 1st century Hegira.
Okay, so this had begun right then.
They had adopted this vocation from the very beginning, that is, when they felt. And I had explained to you that now some confusion had begun to grow. Mischief had also been happening. Fabricated narrations had also started spreading. It wasn't that something like a directive of Umar bin Abdul Aziz was awaited. These people had already initiated this work much earlier than this. They used to visit people. If some narration was offered, they would carry out a thorough investigation of that person and about his whereabouts. What is he reporting? What is the narrator's own personality like? The manner in which this science later came to be organized with its nuances, it wasn't present at the beginning. And it isn't so in any science. Look at grammar or at lexicography. None of them had it. However, the point that the people who were taking responsibility that they would report something in attribution to the Prophet had immunity, or were beyond the scanner of investigation. This was ruled out altogether.
Okay.
Since they were followers of the Companions, all the names I mentioned are followers of the Companions. That is Hassan Basri, Sa'id bin Jubair, Ibrahim Naqi, and Imam Shabi himself. All these are followers of the Companions. These are the people who in those times, though not in this scientific manner that later on was quite organized, however, they had started the process of investigation. So now, what was going on? Now the nature of the issue wasn't that a person reports something through the means of a companion, or attributing to them, states some directive or instruction of the Prophet, peace be upon him, or he states some narration of the knowledge and deed of the Prophet. So he would state it, while people to scrutinize it would come 2 centuries later? No. The people to investigate were present, and nothing could remain hidden from them. The moment it was known that something new has been reported by someone, or some new narration has been reported by somebody, if some news traveled from some city, so these people would set out for it. They would carry out inquiries and would try to find out about the person who has reported what has been reported. In what perspective has he narrated it? Is it riwayatun bil ma'na, or paraphrase as per meaning, or if it's quoted in exact words? On the one hand, those people have emerged who, in the manner of a scholar, have adopted this science as their field of research. And these people also became prominent among them who had started the process of investigation for the narrators. This science, in fact, initiated with this work. When are they doing it? When the companions are still around.
Oh, they're still around.
If the narration has been transmitted by them, then not 2 or 4 or 10 people between, but rather just one person is between them and the Prophet. They are positioned at that very place. It is possible for them that if some follower of the companions reports something attributing it to the companions, then they would meet the companion themselves. They could themselves confirm it. As far as possible, these people made their own efforts. If something has been stated, and obviously, if some point is such that it does not require a special investigation, or if some new information is not there, or some dissatisfaction with regard to its attribution to the Prophet, peace be upon him, isn't there, then it is possible that it may have been ignored too. However, the reason behind relating this is that this work had also initiated, and it was initiated by renowned people. It can be said that these comprised such great men who were imams of Hadith studies, who in order to turn this science into a recognized field of study, had made these efforts initially, took the initiative of meeting people and gathered the details about narrators, and initiated the process of arranging this work as a part of a recognized field of learning and specialization. What all would these people do? When there was a gradual progress in it, what all had people started doing in it? We would endeavor to acquire a brief introduction of it.
Okay.
You can see it in this way. Say, something is reported by a person. What did Hazrat Umar used to do? He used to ask for a witness of it.
Okay.
This was the situation in the times of the companions. I had said that it wasn't done for every narration. If there is something which is actually creating an issue, about which there can be a reluctance to accept it, through which some new directive or some new decision, having been attributed to the Prophet, peace be upon him, can be learned. This method was adopted by him for its investigation. These people also began introducing an innovation in it, and it was that whoever would narrate it would not stop after having narrating it at one place. He would narrate to 1 or 2 people, or would narrate it at some gathering, and that point would start to circulate at multiple places. What would the result be? Its result would be that one single thing, whose reporting had initiated from one place, will now appear through the different narrators before whom it is being narrated, will start forming various chains. These chains were later termed as tariq in the literature. Now that these chains had started to form, they would gather information of each and every chain. They would go after every chain. That is, the point is the same. For example, if you or I come to know that so-and-so person has narrated this attributing it to so-and-so companion, so we would either accept it or would have some doubt regarding it. These people, they would set out that so-and-so person has narrated it, and in the capacity of a follower, he is listening to it from a companion. So who does he narrate it to now? Whoever he narrates it to, they would check for any changes he has made in the words.
Incredible. Okay.
Whether he has tried to bring about a change in its meaning, whether he has abbreviated it, or if the point has been stretched. These are the chains which they would start to gather. A renowned imam later on had said, "If I do not acquire 30 chains for a narration, then I consider myself deprived."
Bizarre. Okay.
This was the level, and this is what inquiry is. I have to research. I won't accept it straight away. The realities that would open upon them. Look at them too. How true a person is. Testimonies started pouring in for this as well, as a result of this process. The same point which he has narrated at one place, if he shortens it, then how far is he preserving the meaning? As for the words he uses, how does he select those words? The study of those chains starts revealing all this.
His memory also gets tested.
The retention power of the narrator was also estimated from it. These people who are listening to him, what are they doing with his words? And the point which he has narrated, the manner in which it is reaching the people. Look at all the three things which later on were made into desiderata, so that how they could analyze hadith. What was the first thing? The first thing was what was the character and behavior of this person. They would begin to form an idea about his conduct and character. The most important thing in conduct and character is to ascertain whether a person is a liar, isn't it? Whether he is humbug, whether he concocts things of his own, whether he mixes things from his side, or he purposely hides something. Only things of this sort would give an idea, right? So this was a sort of practical test as to his character.
How would they find out about that person?
By gathering various chains.
Okay.
They would seat themselves in the gatherings. They would sometimes sit in these gatherings for 6 or 7 years. They would hear narrations from them. Is what is being narrated today same as yesterday? If something was being asked from them yesterday, and if they are being asked today, is there a difference in their statements? Then, when this type of vocation was adopted, that it would also become evident that what was their general character.
The condition.
Character cannot remain hidden. Therefore, minute points were scrutinized. How punctual is he with prayer, and what is his attitude towards commands of the religion? How is he when he meets with people? What sort of family relations does he maintain? How does he treat his children? These aspects were also considered. So, memory would also be judged. They would begin to learn about his life and character. And the most important point based on which they caught the most number of people about their blatant lies was regarding the dates. Any person who falsely attributes something, or the people about which I mentioned that they started to manipulate narrations out of their political compulsions, or they were heretics, who wanted to propagate their religious, ideological, or philosophical compunctions, they had started to manipulate narrations. In the same way, the people who arose as mudhakirin or sermonizers, they would do tadhkir and give sermons. They started doing this. The moment they would do this work, they needed to state in reference to someone, as nothing can now be narrated without giving reference to someone. Every person was being questioned about the companion of the Prophet, to which he is attributing his narration. Now, if the gentleman has ever met that companion, or did he belong to his period or not? So you will find on multiple occasions that person stated such narrations, and they asked him whether he has narrated in attribution to such a person, so please tell us the place he had met him. His reply was a story made up by him. So he said, "My dear, he had departed the world 9 years before you were born."
Strange. Okay.
When a narration is investigated, these are the three things that are generally checked in the first stage. When we declare narration to have a sahih chain of narration, we check the life and the character of the narrator. We also scrutinize the state of the person's memory and retention. How is his itqan, and whether it has been affected by age?
What's itqan, sir?
How much is retained by him? How strong is his narration? It used to be ascertained the moment it was spread, and they would go to multiple places to accumulate them. Then its variations would point out the errors of his retention, or the defects in his understanding. The two words hifz and itikan express the whole personality of his. What is the condition of his comprehension of the issue, and how much has he retained it, and how strongly has he narrated it? This also used to come up as a result of it. We come to know from some historical narrations that several volumes would be compiled on the narrations collected from a single person. When we hear of the later period, that Imam Bukhari had chosen from 7 lakhs ahadith, or so-and-so from 6 lakhs, or another had from these many lakhs ahadith. So a common person thinks that so many things were being stated in attribution to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and among those these several thousand had been chosen. He thinks that all of the rest were concocted lies, or the experts of ahadith had rejected them. It isn't so. What is it which is reported in such large number, say 600,000 or 700,000, with reference to the experts of hadith? These are the different chains of one narration.
Strange, I see.
That is, the point is the same. It is the same point. What they are looking for is if two narrators are there in between him and the Prophet, then what are the places these two narrators are now narrating it?
All of that was collected.
All of them were accumulated. One particular thing takes the form of thousands of narrations.
It becomes grand data.
It used to turn into hundreds. Dozens of paths would be formed, and that number is stated in this manner. Those weren't 700,000 independent points, or they did not comprise 700,000 separate incidents. Those were actually one or two incidents, which the narrators have reported through so many paths, and all those paths have been collected by them. Now, when they have collected all of them, will they now record all those chains? As a result of it, there would appear hundreds of volumes for quoting a single narration. They used to check for the most powerful chain among them.
After having passed through that process,
and they would then select the most robust one among them. Obviously, an expertise is developed with regard to individuals as well as the statements, and the other nuances of that science too. Its result would be that, after collecting hundreds of thousands of paths, an expert of Hadith would start making his selection. The collection of Imam Bukhari would be on such a basis, or if some other expert of Hadith has made such selection, then this is the basis on which it is done. It does not imply that 600,000 or 700,000 narrations had been reported haphazardly by the people. Among them, there were some 1,000 or 2,000 narrations which could have been accepted. No such a large number wasn't there at all. This is the reason I have recounted the whole tale to you, that the Rashidun caliphs and the attitude of the Prophet, peace be upon him, himself, had to a large extent kept things within limits. Not much was narrated by the people. As a large number of narrations which are stated with reference to Abu Hurairah, if you omit the repetitions and look at each of the incidents, then that would limit to a few hundreds and not more than this. Same is the case of those whom we term as muqsirin. If this point is clear, you can then come to understand what these people were up to. The names which I told you of people in the end of the 1st century Hegira. By now, they didn't have 2 or 3 chains of narrations, as the companions themselves are present. That is, there are a lot of companions who are reporting themselves, while some are departing from this world. At the most, there are 1 or 2 people in the chain who are taking that narration forward after having heard it from the companions. With respect to the paths of the narrations, there can be a dozen people who are listening to a narration. They would track all of them, and wherever that narration is being stated, they would follow its trail. Now everybody knew it, whether he is standing at the pulpit of the masjid, where he is giving a speech, or delivering a sermon, he has gathered a collection of people. As the manipulators of narrations would have a definite agenda, he is now aware that it is now out of the question that anyone could narrate anything, that police now exists which would follow their trail.
Okay.
So it was in this way that this science was initiated. And just as it initiated, they started to write down their results too. What is called ilm of rijal, that started to come into existence in this way.
What is rijal, sir?
Meaning the people. If they are thinking that a certain point is being narrated in attribution to companions, then people began to write about their state too. When we see that the lives of thousands of companions are recorded among us, such as Ishaba, Ilistiyab, Usudur Kaaba, and likewise in Tadhkiratul Hufal, we learn about the states of a large number of companions. These states were primarily compiled due to the requirements of narrations.
Okay.
That is, separately too, obviously, the people would have been interested. However, mostly the experts of this science had compiled these facts. The same was the case among followers of companions. Whoever narrated these reported is now marked by them. Each and every person who was named in these chains of narrations, they would start supplying information about him. If they fail in their objective, even after accumulating the information, they would still confess that they were unable to locate this person and he is unknown.
A small point, Gandhi Sahab, the work which they had initiated, which was so amazing. And if one thinks they began this work 1400 years back, history is being transmitted from thousands of years. Has such a large-scale verification process ever taken place in the process of transmission of history?
I have said this earlier, and admit this once more, that in the entire history of the world, there has been no parallel of it.
Okay.
This is the work of our great experts of Hadith, and look what is at the back of it. These are not the sayings of an ordinary human being, neither of a philosopher nor of a sage. It is not merely the sayings of a scholar. These are the sayings of Muhammad, the messenger of God. What was that thing which made these people so committed that they chose to devote their lives to its preservation. They had to face harsh criticism in the beginning as well. This is because the people who were narrating them, some among them would be preachers. They too would have disciples. If there are some Sufis, I am using the word Sufi with a specific interpretation, implying people who were devout and ascetic. They later on came to be called Sufis, and of course people must have been attached to them. When they started criticizing such people, saying that their character is such and such is their life, and such lies are narrated among them, and they aren't careful in such matters. And then they started to coin its different terminologies, such as well-known ones, Mabihibaz, Sika, Hujat, Hafiz, Suduk, the different terms, and each expert of Hadith formed his own terms. They are now stating them, to the extent that if someone was inquired about his father or brother, whether he too states the narrations, "What is your opinion?" And if he isn't good enough for this, they would make their frank comment on him too.
Okay.
As a result of it, the people started saying that they spend the entire day backbiting people. And sometimes, when they would sit and teach their students in the gathering of their students, they would say that, "Come, let us do some backbiting or ghibah." They replied to this. They said that it comprises a religious duty. The matter isn't that we have set out to highlight the defects of a person. The person who has decided to accuse us, saying that we are doing ghibah, should shut his mouth. As we shall continue to carry on this work, we have to make sure that when a person narrates something in attribution to the Prophet, peace be upon him, then he carries a great responsibility on himself. He is communicating to the people something from the messenger of God, so now he should be ready for this. That will probe his life too, investigate his character too, and bring to light all his traits, and scan each and every aspect of his life. In this regard, for example, in Kita, when we say that such a narration has become munqatir,
Yes.
you are aware of a popular narration, and which is generally accepted. I also feel that the narration is okay. We cannot have any objection with regard to its meaning. The expertise that is often developed among the experts of a field. In that light, we can say that it actually looks like the saying of the Prophet, peace be upon him.
Right.
While sending the companion Hazrat Maaz to Yemen, the Prophet asked, how would he decide if some issue comes up? He said that he would turn toward the Book of God, and if you do not find the solution there, he said, I will look at your practice. If you do not find it there as well, he said, "Ijtahidu ra'ya wa la alu juhdan." I will use my intellect, and I won't shirk any effort, so that I reach to the right solution. This is the word which has given birth to the term ijtihad among us.
Right.
The reporters of this narration have not named one person at one place. Note, at one place.
Okay.
They have said that they heard this from the ashab, or companions of Maaz. The names were not mentioned. There is Maaz, and pious people are there down the line too. There is nothing objectionable, however. The name wasn't mentioned. So now, what would we think? Who were the people who were accompanying Maaz? If it is not certain, then are we to make guesses about each one of them? They declare this narration munqati'.
In spite of such an important point.
Even though such a valuable thing is there, I will tell you an incident of mine. I quoted this narration in the preface of one of my books. In an introduction, obviously, the aim is not to state something after carrying out due diligence in it. The narration was common and found written in books. I wrote it. This was from my initial days. One Islahi Hadith scholar came to meet me. He used to speak in Punjabi. He came and sat down. I exchanged pleasantries and offered tea. He said that those things can wait. He took out the journal, pointed to my essay, and asked, "Did you write this?" I said yes. "Was this narration also quoted by you yourself?" I said yes. "Now take it all the way to the Prophet."
I see.
He meant that I should prove its chain.
Because it isn't muttasil.
In its chain are people whose name are not ascertainable. When the names are not confirmed, we cannot place this narration at a position where the narrations attributed to the Prophet, peace be upon him, are supposed to be placed. Here, it has also happened at times We will see that later on, that people had to undertake long journeys. It was heard that a particular narration has reached a certain city. So, if it has reached there, that place is to be visited too.
Really?
Traveling in those times, you can imagine that it wasn't like present times. Those means are not existing, which will inform you beforehand. Traveling, coming back, meeting one another and interacting with one another, and passing information to each other. And at times, several months and even several years were spent waiting there, so as to be able to ascertain and reach to the right assessment about the person. The chains are being gathered. The direct meeting with the people is also being done, and in this manner the work of investigation was being done by these people. So, I had said, this had initiated since the end of the 1st century Hegira. It wasn't an investigation of the kind that living in the 3rd century Hegira, speculations are being done for the 5 or 7 people up the chain. This entire science started being transmitted. Its transmission had begun soon after the companions. When the number of pupils grew, and an orderly batch of students emerged, they are now becoming scholars. People have begun to refer to them. Hence, the narrations no more remained the reporting of common people. Rather, wherever it starts spreading and becomes publicized, it comes back to them eventually. It will finally be issued from their end.
People too must become confident in this process.
This is its necessary consequence. It reaches them as this is their objective. The same is being done by the scholars of the science of men too. They keep on with this service. I have presented a short picture of it. Otherwise, if a discussion is done on this knowledge alone, or on its circumstances and on the efforts made by these people, then several sessions would also be insufficient for them. If each and every expert's life is studied, where did he take birth? How did he start his career in it? Which all cities he made visits to? How many journeys had he undertaken? How many individuals he met for this purpose? And how many chains did he collect? And what kind of selection he made among them? And then what were the writings produced by him? People just know them as Bukhari or Muslim, dozens of such compilations in which the narrations were collected, or in which the detailed descriptions of people were collected. And when they discovered some defects, which otherwise seemed to be satisfactory narrations, however, there were some points about them which a common man does not detect when they were stated, then you would note that these experts of Hadith, whose names I read out to you, look at the list of their works, the nature of scholarship they had begun to produce. This was the point of the beginning of this science. I have included some aspects of its later manifestations as well to explain to you the way they used to function. How did they ascertain the life and character of the person they were narrating from? It wasn't mere speculation or mere hearsay that they were reporting. It isn't merely the impressions. They too made mistakes, however. This narration passes through such an investigation. In the same way they try to find out the histories of each and every person when people attribute and narrate from a companion. So, when did he die? Has so-and-so person visited that town? Has he ever traveled to that region? This information would be collected. The finding of this history confirms whether the narration has the connection, or a connection is possible, or a connection can be accepted. With regard to memory and retention, a study of particular individuals is made, whether he sits every day or twice in a week, whether he has narrated this to 10 people or to 50 people. We see the changes that were made by him while narrating it on different occasions. You will see that careless people would be narrating the same incident or the same narration, and every time they would make some addition or omission in them. But these scholars would bring out all these defects, and based on their findings, when we presently open the books of GCIL and see their critical comments, so these comments were not made just superficially. These were the findings of this research, perseverance, hard work, and determination. Whatever that was possible at the human level for this knowledge has been done to make it possible. Who are these people? Very renowned and admirable. They hold an extraordinary status in their knowledge and chastity, piety, and in harmony with this learning. Only then they could gain the confidence of people. Therefore, when people look at the body of the companions, we say, As-sahabatu kulluhum udulun. It is said about them that their level is such, which do not require any questioning. These personalities have risen above such things, as they, with their knowledge, deed, commitment the result of their thoughts, and testifying this from their entire life, they have proven this reality. Following this, now I will tell you, when Hazrat Umar bin Abdul Aziz had issued the directive, then who were the people born in the 2nd century Hijra, and what were the writings that came to the forefront, till finally that era arrived when those 6 books, which we call the 6 reliable books, came to be compiled.
Ghamidi Sahab, what happened during the times of the followers of the companions, and what an extraordinary tradition had they laid down. And the nature of the works of A'immatul Jarh wa Ta'dil Ashabul Rijal were presented by Ghamidi Sahab in such a manner that we can be proud of our history and greatness. It is a very significant point that such a scholarly tradition exists in the history of Muslims, which has absolutely no parallels in the history of the world. We shall take the discussion ahead and will know what practical results followed as a result. We have used up the time allocated to us. Thank you very much for your time till now.